A good morning, everyone, for Tov. So, as we do every week, we have a story, and we try with the Baal Shem Tov, Sipur Tzadikim. We have also a few stories that have been submitted. So let's see what we get to today. So we have let's start off with a story of the Baal Shem Tov, which is our custom. And the Baal Shem Tov story, actually, I read in a letter on Shabbos that the Holy Magidim is rich, which is a student, of course, the student of the Baal Shem Tov, writes a letter to his colleague, which was known as the Toldos Yaakov Yosef. So it's a letter from the Maggid Mizrich to the Toldos Yaakov Yosef. Toldos Yaakov Yosef was one of the older students, Talmidim of the Baal Shem Tov. The Maggid became a student, I believe, later. And he was also very one of the first books of Chassidus is the Toldos Yaakov Yosef, a very special Hasidic Rebbe, very close to the Baal Shem Tov. There's many stories about him that Mirz Hashem will get to. So the letter goes as follows. He says, as is the custom, I believe he said, I forgot to take a picture. I was going to post the letter, but I forgot. So the Maggid says that as is the custom, there was different mishmaris, there was different, so to say, turns that the students had. Now, depending on a lot of the students of the Holy Baal Shem Tov weren't like what we call yeshiva students. Some of them were elder. We're not even sure how old the Maggid Mizrich was. It's even possible, according to some people, that the Maggid Mizrich was older than the Baal Shem Tov. We don't know his birth date. We know when he passed away on Chav Kislev, and we don't know exactly his age. So we're not 100% sure how old the Maggid was. But Maggid was an established Maggid and great figure of Yiddishkeit by the time he became a student of the Holy Baal Shem Tov, because he went to seek the Baal Shem Tov's initial advice for healing. But we see there's letters of the Baal Shem Tov reaching out to get to the Maggid. We know the Holy Pnei Yeshua, famous author on the commentary on the Talmud, was pushed the Maggid to go to the Baal Shem Tov. While he himself didn't go to the Baal Shem Tov, the Pnei Yeshua, but he pushed the Maggid to go to Baal Shem Tov. My point is that the fact that the Baal Shem Tov, that the Maggid was present by the Baal Shem Tov for long periods of time, it wasn't like he had nowhere else to be. He was a Maggid, he had a job, he was in a big position. But they would spend long periods of time by the Rebbe. The Toldos was a Rav of a city, so it could be that he had less of a chance. So he says, as is known, that we have a different mishmaras, different, so to say, turns and cycle of turns, that the students basically, from the letter it seems, and this is something that I heard about the Baba Sali, the Holy Baba Sali as well, that they would sit by the Holy Baal Shem Tov, the students, while the Baal Shem Tov was sleeping, the students would sit in his room, and in this case, the Maggid says they would learn Mishnayos. So as they're learning Mishnah, he would learn Mishnayos quietly, as the Baal Shem Tov was sleeping. It's a kind of a way that the soul, while it's sleeping, is connecting to Torah. I heard from someone who said that at some point the Holy Baba Sali made his way to France, and he stayed for a few months in the yeshiva, the Chabad yeshiva in Bermois. And so the Rebbe said that they should give him, this is early years in the 40s or 50s, that they should give him his own room and his own, cater to him, whatever the Baba Sali needed. So one of the things the Baba Sali wanted was that that's how I hear the story, that someone should sit by his bedside and also read the Zohar while he's sleeping. And if the person made a mistake in the pronunciation, the Holy Baba Sali in his sleep would break his sleep and correct it. So the Maggid writes is this. He goes, it was my turn to learn Mishnayos by the Baal Shem Tov. He's sitting by the bed. All of a sudden, the Baal Shem Tov calls me and he says, Berela. The Maggid's name is Dov Ber. He says, Berela, go to the cupboard and get me my new stick and bring it to me. So he comes and he brings this. He says, I bring the stick to our teacher, the Baal Shem Tov. And the Baal Shem Tov takes the stick, holds it for a second, gives it back to me and says, now give the stick to the person who's standing in front of you. Now he's in his own bedroom. He's in the bedroom of the Baal Shem Tov, wherever the Baal Shem Tov is sleeping. There's no one in the. He says there's no one in the Maggid writes in this letter. It's a one-page letter. There's no one in the room opposite me. But the Baal Shem Tov said to give it. So as a chassid, you don't question your Rebbe. So he takes the stick and he sticks it out as if he's handing it to someone. It goes all of a sudden he describes in the letter. There's different descriptions of people. We know that man is described in Torah in four names. It was in Hayom Yom recently. It was the highest levels of person is Adam. Then you have Ish, and you have gever, and then you have enosh. Seemingly the lowest, from the Yom Yom, it seems the lowest level is enosh, which means you're very weak in your intellectual or in your emotional connection to Hashem. Gvura, the gever, is kind of trying to rectify that to make the person stronger, from the word gvura, gever. Now, so he describes in the letter that there was an enosh was standing there. He says, and a hand sticks out. Doesn't say that it was a person, it just seems like a hand sticks out, grabs the stick and pulls it back in, and the stick, everything disappears. So, and the Maggid says that I was trembling, my knees were shaking, I was trembling of this scene. The Baal Shem Tov calls me back, and he says, Barala, don't be so nervous. I'll tell you, this person, and it's not clear from the letter, if the person is when this person gave this stick to the Baal Shem Tov. So the Baal Shem Tov, he says, give him the stick and tell him, sorry, I forgot, he said, give him the stick and say, sorry, I can't help you. You have to take the stick back. So he says the Baal Shem Tov says, so the hand, this enosh, he says, kind of is there. It seems like some sort of present of a person, but not a person. A hand sticks out, grabs the stick, pulls it back, and everything disappears. So he's very shocking. So the Baal Shem Tov says to him, Barala, don't be so nervous. He says, this person gifted me this stick, and he passed away. When he was alive, he was over al kol Torah kula. I don't know what that means. He says he transgressed every single violation of Torah. But you would think if that kind of person would be a person that has nothing to do with the Baal Shem Tov. But in some way or another, he gifted the Baal Shem Tov this staff. It's not clear if it's in his if when he was alive or after he passed away. But he gifted him this staff. And he says, he was a hoizbacher. This person was like a house boy by my student, Yosef, the Toldos Yosef of Polonia. That means the Toldos Yaakov Yosef. And he gave me the stick, and now his neshama doesn't get any menucha because of all the averos he did, all the transgressions he did, and he wants me to find him a tikkun. I can't find him a tikkun, so I want to give him back the stick. That's why I'm not sure if he gave him the stick when he was alive, and now because he gifted the Baal Shem Tov, he wants the Baal Shem Tov to help him, or some way or another, there's some sort of spiritual thing, and he gave him the stick after as a neshama, as a ruach, as a spirit. But either way, the Baal Shem Tov gives back the stick, and because he says he's been bothering me and hassling me, and I can't help him, so I give back the stick. So the Maggid is writing a letter to the Toldos, telling him the story and saying maybe you know something about this person, because he said he was a student he was a houseboy by the Toldos Yaakov Yosef, and basically maybe you could help him because he was connected to you. But that's the story. That's the letter. There's no continuation to the story. That's the letter where the Maggid the Mizrich is writing to the Toldos Yaakov Yosef. It's a fascinating story because first of all the details of the story, all the details, the fact that the Maggid was sitting there reading Mishnayos, the spirit, the type of person that was a houseboy by the Toldos Yaakov Yosef. Nevertheless, he violated every sin of the Torah. That's strong language. But I'll post the letter when I get back on the group chat so we could see the letter from the Maggid the Mizrich. Excuse me, of this story. Another story I wanted to tell quickly it was submitted to me by someone. The story happened to him. It's a story, Rebecca asked if we could say stories of Hashgacha Pratis. So he said, primarily we like to say Sipuri Tzadikim, stories of Tzadikim, primarily the Baal Shem Tov, but we said a story about Baal Shem Tov. So I'll tell over the story that was submitted to me of Hashgacha Pratis, of Divine Providence. This person sends me a message that he was, again, hearing this firsthand, that he was a soldier, in the Nachal Brigade, and they have the uniform. So he was on, I guess, a Shabbos off or what have you, and he left his beret. I understand he left his beret where he was staying, and he had to go back to his apartment that he was staying to get his beret, and then he could go back on the bus to his base. And because of that, he was late, and he was going to come late to the base, which is, of course, not good if you're a soldier. He gets a phone call from his commander, and he says, "Where are you?" So he says, "Are you okay?" He says, "What do you mean?" Because I guess the commander has to know exactly when you're coming back, what bus you're taking, so everything. He says, "The bus that you were supposed to take just had a bombing, a bus in Beersheba, just had a bombing, your bus blew up. So I want to know what's going on." So he realized that basically Hashgacha Pratis that he left his brain. Baruch Hashem, he lives now in the United States with the family. He was saved of the fact that he forgot something. So that's a story of Hashgacha Pratis. We have a little time, so we're not rushing on the stories. So there's another story. Someone in Shul asked me, unfortunately, in Shul this week, asked me about, what God forbid happens to the person if they commit suicide. I don't remember if we told the story over in the past few months that we've been telling stories. So, but if I did, forgive me for repeating the story. But again, the story of Mesiras Nefesh is always a story worth to tell over every week. So this person asked me if a person commits suicide, if what happens? So I said it's hard. You can't answer these questions. I'm definitely not in a position to answer these questions off the cuff. It depends on the circumstances. There's a lot of rules according to the Rambam about these things. I said because he told me that a friend of his brothers was very, very old and for some reason just recently committed suicide, so he was feeling very down. So I told him this story. I said like this: there was I forget I have to remember the details of the story. But basically, there was I think I did tell the story, but I'm going to tell it again anyways. There was a young boy who the I think the Rebbe Rashab or maybe the Tzemach Tzedek there was watching him during davening and kind of looking at him, and they felt something to the effect that the Chassidim wanted to know, means they realized there's something about this going to happen to this child, that they always followed his life. And what happened was this chassid, this young boy gets drafted in the Kantanistim. The Kantanistim, of course, was the horrible gezerah that the Tsar did to try to assimilate the Jewish boys by kidnapping them from their families at a young age and putting them at long periods of time in the army, where they had no opportunity for Yiddishkeit, and it broke them. At the time they got out, which they already past their adult life, midway through their adult life in their 50s, they were broken people. The Tzemach Tzedek had to deal was very strong trying to deal with getting rid of this horrible gezer of the Kantanistim. And they were called Kantanistim. They had their own shuls because they never really blend in. It was a bad story from many angles. The communities were obligated to submit the boys, and they submitted the poor boys, not the basically it was a sign that of your class. It brought out the worst, and it was bad story all around. But they were soldiers, and they were soldiers in the army. And so one time the Tsar came to visit this platoon, and said they said that whoever's going to be able to do a certain maneuver in the army is going to get an elevation of a high rank just for doing this maneuver. And one of the Kantanistim, a Jewish boy, was a very good, skilled soldier, and he won the competition. So the Tsar, of course, wants to reward him with his promotion, to high position in the army. But when he finds out that he was a Kantanist, that he was a Jew, he had a dilemma, the Tsar dilemma, because we know the Tsars were raging anti-Semites. They hated the Jews. And so he thought like this. He said, I want to give you the promotion because you deserve it, but I won't put a Jew to such a position. So what's of course the alternative? You have to come Sunday to convert. You'll become a Christian, and then I'm going to give you the promotion. And he wasn't asking him. It wasn't like this. The Kantanist soldier could say, "No, thank you. I'll stay my low rank. I'm going to stay Jewish." He had no choice. So his being brave and trying to show his devotion to the Tsar's army and being a good soldier was now costing him even further. So he doesn't know what to do. So there's some sort of freedom that the Kantanistim, they weren't imprisoned, but they were very tightly controlled by the army. So he walked into Shul by the Chassidim, and he asked the same question. He asked, what happens halachically if a person commits suicide? So they told him, if you commit suicide, and that's what the answer they told him, is you forfeit your portion in the world to come. So he said, but do you remain a Jew? Yes, of course you remain a Jew. So he said, okay. Later, on his way to the ceremony that he was being taken to for Sunday for the conversion, again, it wasn't a choice. As the wagon was getting closer to a place that was more dangerous road, and there was a cliff, he jumped out of the wagon, and the story goes that they heard him shout that I don't have a portion in the world to come, but I remain a Jew. That's a story of Mesiras Nefesh, of the Kantanistim. Of course, like I said, these stories are complicated. Of course, he has a portion of the world to come. He's no different than any of the other great Kedoshim, that holy people that sanctified Hashem's name. So yes, this month of El is a time to mention stories like this of great peoples who had Mesiras Nefesh for Hashem, and that should be a meditation. That should be a reminder to God for His love for the Jewish people, and to bless us all with the Shana Tov and Mesukah. So those are the stories for this week. Again, I will post Bezrat Hashem the letter of the Maggid. It's in Hebrew, so I'll try to translate it, and because I think it's a fascinating story. Although it doesn't really, like I told the story over the Shabbos table. My son says, "So what's the point of the story?" The point is there's certain points. This is what happened once upon a time. Okay, let's go to the halachos. Okay, we're going to get to the halachos now. We're still learning the halachos of Sefer Torah. Again, these are not necessarily the easiest laws. Let's bring up the text. Here we go. So holding halacha 20 in chapter 23. So let's just read a little bit of the footnotes of the opening of the law over here in English. It says, as we look into Sefer Torah, we become aware of gaps and spaces in the text. Right? Anyone who looks at the Sefer Torah is made up of beams of amudim, which is pages. Each page has in it what's called spaces in the text. This, as many of the laws and traditions concerning the writing of a Sefer Torah, has been handed down to us from generation to generation, originating from the giving of the Torah and Har Sinai, meaning what's known as halacha l'Moshe Misinai, that how the Sefer Torah is written, with its openings, gaps, and open spaces, that's all halacha l'Moshe Misinai. Means a Sefer Torah has to have that has to look as such. Each of these text breaks denotes the completion of a chapter. So if there's a break, and there's what's called psucha and stuma. Psucha means, as we're going to see in a second, is that it stays open to the end of the line. Sometimes you have a stuma. So the Rambam and the laws of Sefer Torah teaches us how to write it and how he checked many Sefer Torahs and what the traditions are. So because each of these text breaks donated the completion of a chapter. This should not be confused with the numbered chapters and verses that are found in the printed scriptures, for these are attributed to non-Jewish sources. This is a very important thing that people maybe are not aware of. Why the Jewish people accepted it as something else. Let's see, maybe footnote 42. The notations sheni shlishi do not constitute halachic portions. Okay, parshios. So again, so he adds that another thing. So first of all, verses and chapters is not from Torah. Verses and chapters that we have in the Torah comes from Christian sources. They've added to what they call the Old Testament chapters and verses. For some reason Jews took it on, because we say parak this, pasuk this, that everyone spoke about it in the Fabrengen, why we would take the Parakim and the Sicha and the Psukim if they're not Jewish sources. But the division of the Torah, as the Torah views it, is parshias, sections. And those sections are not divided, like he says in footnote number 42, by the readings, meaning Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, or Rishon, Cohen, Levi, Yisrael. That's not a portion. The portion is the divisions in the Torah that are chapters called parshios, and they have the separation of the spaces in the Sefer Torah. That's the portions of the Torah. Psukim, verses, chapters, the way we know it today, that's not part of halacha. That's what came from Christian sources. It doesn't want to say Christian, but non-Jewish sources means Christian sources. There are two kinds of text breaks. One is called the psucha. Psucha means an open, i.e., the text ends in middle of a midline, and the remainder of the line is left open, with the text resuming at the beginning of the next line. So psucha is it stays open to the end of the line. Stuma is there's opening, but there's wording afterwards to finish the line. Stuma, closed. In other words, the text ends mid-line, and after a gap, the text resumes on the same line. So that's the difference between when it says in the halacha between a stuma and a psucha in the Sefer Torah. In effect, closing the line. So it is opening, but the line is closed from both sides with words. Paragraph 20 concerns the precautions taken to avoid the impression that that less than 3 verses may vary by the reading of one ola. Okay, so the idea is that we're trying to get into what happens with one ola. One person goes up. How do we deal with the divisions, the actual parshas of the Torah? So that's what he says over here. Hakor b'Torah. If someone's called up to the Torah, means you get an aliyah. Today we already have set aliyahs, meaning to say we have, especially in Chabad where we don't add aliyahs, we have set aliyahs. So we know already going in. Where's Rishon and Sheni? Of course, there could be a few disagreements, but he says like this: Hakor b'Torah. If someone gets called up to the Torah, and we said you have to read at least 10 verses on a Monday, Thursday. The third aliyah should be the one with 4, and the other 2 with 3. The only time we read 3, 3, 3 is, we said, Purim, because that's the whole subject, that's the whole parsha. This is Hakor b'Torah. Lo yisayim b'makom shelo yishar misham parsha ad parsha dahainu psucha istum or gimel psukim chal pachas. Means you shouldn't finish with less than 3 psukim verses. See, I have to check this because he writes over here in the parentheses that this should not be confused with numbered chapters and verses. He's writing over here verses, meaning the psukim are also non-Jewish sources. But then we apply it to the halacha because you have to have 3 psukim before the end of the parsha. I always understood that only the chapters, the way we know them, are divided by the church, and the verses are the same. It could be what he means over here. I have to check. Could be what he means that the verses from non-Jewish sources is that the number of the number of the verse, meaning to say, is pasuk aleph, pasuk beis, verse 1, verse 2. So if the chapter, because if you finish a chapter and the chapter is not part of Torah, so verse 30 being the end of the chapter, and then the next chapter starting verse 1 again, so that's not according to Torah, because the verses, numbers of the verse are connected to the chapters, and the chapters are not Torah. But the actual verse itself means that from this word to this word is a verse. Just what number verse it is we don't have anymore. That could be what he means, that the 3 psukim before the parsha. Because I think the psukim themselves, that this is a verse, was always, that's from Torah. I have to check, I'm not sure. But the numbered verses, to say that this is the numbered verse, he says numbered. That's why he says with the word numbered chapters, a numbered verse. So the numbered verse is not according to Torah. We accept it because that's the way till today everyone accepts the numbers, but it wasn't given down from Moshe or Sinai. But the actual words, that these words are a verse, I think that is Torah, because that's what, otherwise it wouldn't be in the halacha that you have to have 3 verses before psucha stuma, before the end of a parsha, if the verse is not something that's Torah. Okay, if anyone knows differently, please add in. So hakar b'Torah lo yisayim b'makom shelo yishar misham ad parsha. So you should leave to the end of the parsha, which is psucha stuma, 3 psukim, 3 verses, l'chol pachas minimum. But if you didn't leave and you already made the final blessing, samach leparsha, and you left less than 3 verses to the end of the parsha, of the person who reads next, you don't have to go back, like we said in certain times, like by Rosh Chodesh, we go back. You don't have to go back. So you should start 3 verses before the end of the parsha. You just continue where the person left off. And add at least 3 verses into the next parsha. So let's say you left 2 psukim, so you do 2 psukim from the previous parsha, plus an additional 3 psukim from the new parsha. Again, parsha is not chapters. Parsha is the divisions by the openings of the Torah. The parshas don't have numbers, as far as I know. There's no number of parshas. I mean, we can maybe know the number of parshas in the Torah, but they're not numbered, as far as I know. It could be a parsha that's itself only 2 verses. You could finish after the 2 psukim, the 2 verses, if you had 2 verses from the other one, or 1 even. What happens if there's a division in a pasuk? I believe it's in Vayetze, we have such a thing. Vayetze, yes, over there by when they count the sons of Yaakov. So there's a separation in the pasuk itself. You're going with Chilas Parshas Pinchas, or he says at the beginning of Parshas Pinchas. Mutir l'sayim afilu pasuk hasamachla. So then you could complete the reading even to the parsha, to the pasuk next to it, because anyways the break is not exactly typical. Let's see the footnotes over here. 3 verses. He says, so that everyone who might leave, so that anyone who might leave the synagogue just then not leave with the impression that the text reading would contain only 2 verses. So therefore, he says you should at least read 3 verses so someone shouldn't see who just, I think someone who entered now, not anyone who left. But leave the synagogue just then, not leave with the impression that the next reading, would contain only 2 verses that's remaining to the end of the parsha, but that you have an additional 3 verses. Okay. Number 44. Okay. Number 45. Okay, to understand what it means, the parsha and the end of the parsha, psucha and stuma. 46, he says, it's too late to correct any false impressions because you already finished it, so therefore you just continue. 47 is in Pinchas Numbers 25:19. There's a division in the pasuk. I have to check that. And over here he says, and the reading may end at the very next verse, because no one could possibly think that 1 verse was read for an olah. So the whole point of this is that we don't want someone who's leaving the shul to think that there was less than 3 psukim. So therefore, we always leave it in a space to think, okay, the next portion has at least 3 psukim. That's kind of what seems to be what's bothering the halacha over here. Okay, he continues. Let's just go through this. You shouldn't start a parsha from less than 3 verses to the end of the parsha. Okay, the point is basically always leave 3 psukim to give them, so no one should think that a reading could be less than 3 psukim. So that one might arrive one who might arrive just then should not think that the previous olah had only 2 verses. So basically what they're saying is, just to put it easier, that we're very concerned for whatever reason that people that come into shul late or leave early shouldn't think that there's ever a possibility for an aliyah less than 3 psukim, so we accommodate that concern. That's the bottom line. Okay, this is another thing. We always try to start an aliyah in a good story, in a good subject. Not always is the Torah talking about positive things, right? The Chet Egel, the story of the spies. Well, the sign b'davar tov, and at the end it should be good. The Yisrael, something that's good for the Jewish people. We don't finish with someone who did something wrong. So he says 50. That's why this is actually applicable to this week's parsha Kisavo. Kisavo coming up this next week is going to be the large curses. So what they did is they made all the aliyahs, I think it's Shishi, so all the aliyahs up to Shishi will be short aliyahs, or shorter aliyahs, like Risha and Sheni, the short aliyahs. Shlishi, I think, is a short aliyah. Maybe Revi is a little longer. Why? Because they have to borrow from the brachos in the beginning of the aliyah, and they don't just finish off after the curses to leave with something positive. So you have to have sandwiched in. Not all parshas. I remember if you go into Korach and you go into Shlach, it gets a little complicated to have beginning in good and ending in good. So it could be the reason is because there's very long parshas and it's very hard to keep the subject good. So he says, why not to do someone who did something wrong based on the verse Al Tamid B'Davar Ra. Don't stop with something bad. So don't stop an aliyah with something bad. Do not stop at something evil. All right, we're going to stop here because even though we've been going very slow through this parak, and it's not so maybe so interesting for people because today the aliyahs are kind of set up. And we'll go into shul. We open the chumash. We know we're going to start and stop unless you go to a shul that likes to break up. Very few shuls like to break up because first of all it takes time, and second of all because they only do it in extreme circumstances. There's a bar mitzvah, a chasna, or they need a lot of aliyahs. Maybe a lot of people have yahrzeit, but in Chabad again, it's not our custom to do that. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining, and I'll try to post those that letter of the Magid. about the story of the Baal Shem Tov and translate it. Otherwise, have a wonderful week. Shvuah Tov.
Thank you.